Remember the 1970s and the rise of a particular kind of protagonist? People taking matters into their own hands, administering justice to those criminals who escaped the law. You remember when we cheered as Dirty Harry blew away the bad guy with a snarl and a snappy one-liner?
Well, do you, punk?
This is the time when Americans wanted bloody retribution from the barrel of a gun. And it was the birth of one of the most iconic street-level anti-heroes there ever was and ever will be. Do you remember when the Punisher was cool? I do. And be sure to visit NorahSaga.com for your copy of my latest book, Norah Saga, Season 1, Song of the Fossegrim. 136 pages, 6 issues, 1 unforgettable adventure. How far would you go to get home? The Punisher's always been a favorite of mine, going back to high school, 1989, 1990. And this is a huge time for movies, for comics, and comic book movies. The success of Tim Burton's Batman led to the first real wave of comic book movie adaptations, and the comic book industry was building up to one of its most successful periods ever. This mad dash to capitalize on the growing fandom of comic books led to some amazing films, and also some really terrible ones. Movies like Roger Corman's Fantastic Four and the near miss of The Punisher, starring Dolph Lundgren. I say near miss because there's a lot of good stuff in it, and honestly, all of the Punisher movies are near misses because there's cool stuff in all of them, I'll give them that, but none of them have hit the mark. But would you be surprised to learn that there is a movie starring Rutger Hauer that was made several years earlier that manages to capture the attitude and even the gadgets of the Punisher better than any other adaptation? Well, hang on, because we'll get back to that. But first off, who is the Punisher? Returning home to his family after several tours of duty in the Marines and even seeing combat in Vietnam, Frank Castle was enjoying a day off and a picnic with his wife and his 2 children, Lisa and Frank Jr. When they are witness to a mob hit, the assassins open fire on the family, killing all but Frank, setting him on a warpath of vengeance through New York's criminal underground. Wearing the iconic skull symbol, he strikes fear into the heart of any evildoer, letting them know that they will be punished. First appearance of the Punisher was in The Amazing Spider-Man number 129, where he's contracted by the Jackal to kill Spider-Man for the apparent murder of Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin. But realizing that Spider-Man was one of the good guys, Castle lets him go, illustrating that even for an assassin, the Punisher operates with a moral code. The character's popularity led him to appearing in many books over the years, including Frank Miller's seminal work on Daredevil. But he didn't get his own series until 10 years later, 1986. By this time, the anti-hero archetype was in full swing. Lone Wolf McQuade, Escape from New York, Raw Deal, Commando had been thrilling audiences and satisfying their bloodlust since the start of the 80s. It was clear that this anti-hero's popularity was here to stay, and more in demand than ever. This led to the Punisher's first solo 5-issue miniseries written by Stephen Grant and drawn by Mike Zeck. The Punisher's first solo ongoing adventure was soon to follow by Mike Baron and Klaus Janson in 1987, and a spin-off series called The Punisher War Journal a year later in 1988. The character's popularity led to a third ongoing series, The Punisher War Zone, one of my favorites, written by Chuck Dixon and drawn by John Romita Jr. After 21 years of thrilling fans, it all came to an end when all 3 ongoing titles were canceled in 1995, and the Punisher was relegated to being a guest star again for the next 5 years, until Garth Ennis revived the character as part of the darker-themed line of comics known as Marvel Knights in the year 2000, which I never read, and I'm sure it's fine. I've said it many times that the sweet spot for comics and movies was from 1985 to 1995, which by no coincidence was the time when the Punisher reigned supreme. First time I think I ever read the Punisher was The Punisher Annual #1 by Mike Baron and Mark Texeira, and one of the few times he was ever inked by another artist, namely Scott Williams. It was a fun story where Frank was in Bogota to stop this drug lord and ends up in a fight with the Eliminators, these cool armored characters, apparently sent by the High Evolutionary. And the whole story ends in this dramatic finale that had me wanting more. The annual was also notable to me for having a backup story featuring Microchip, one of the Punisher's only compatriots in his war on crime. And this awesome issue also introduced me to the amazingly detailed work of Elliot R. Brown, the man that drew every cutaway and schematic you've ever seen in the Marvel comic book. We get to see the Punisher's van and its interior filled with weapons and gadgets of all kinds. And also his lair, the warehouse, where Frank trains, plans his mission, and gears up for battle. Remember when earlier I said that there was a movie made several years before the Dolph Lundgren Punisher that felt more like the comic that we know and love than any other film adaptation ever made of the character? That movie's called Wanted, Dead or Alive, starring Rutger Hauer and Gene Simmons.
This is a flashpoint situation.
I've been waiting to kill him for a long time.
What the hell is going on?
You think I knew they were using you as bait? You're better off with us than bananas, Randolph.
Rutger Hauer, wanted, dead or alive.
All right, thanks everybody for being here for this episode of Remember When, The Punisher. If you'd like to see more of these, please subscribe and hit that bell for notifications. Also, leave a comment letting me know other great characters that you'd like to see explored here in this series. Till then, thanks for being here. Love you. See you next time. Later, gang!